All right, let's take some time to go over our next set of organelles, the mitochondria and the chloroplast, and then real briefly the peroxisome. Um, so first of all, the mitochondria and the chloroplast specifically have been thought to have been derived from actual bacteria, billions of years ago when larger cells, presumably eukaryotic cells, swallowed either what's called a chemotroph, something that breaks down chemicals and turns them into energy, or a phototroph, which would be like a bacteria that takes light energy and turns it into chemical energy. So the thought is that larger cells engulf these, and then the hematroph turned into the mitochondria, and the chloroplast would have been derived from the phototroph. I'll say a little bit more about and talk about evidence about that later, but just keep in mind mitochondria is where the cell makes its takes its sugar and other kind of energy storage molecules, turns them into ATP. The ATP is what the cell actually can use for chemical energy in the cell. Chloroplasts they take light energy and then they convert it into chemical energy, and they store that in many cases in some type of carbohydrate. Um, you're going to find chloroplasts in algae, plants, maybe some other like protozoans that will have, they'll move around and they'll have chloroplasts in them. Mitochondria will be found in all eukaryotic cells. Okay, so plants have mitochondria, animals have mitochondria, fungus have mitochondria, algae, protozoans, we call them protists, they all have mitochondria. Right? And I'll say just a couple words on peroxisomes at the end. I don't really regard them as that important for our class, but it's in here, so I feel like why not say a couple words on this. So it's important to remember they're not a part of the endomembrane system. They have a different origin than the endomembrane system. They have two membranes. So when you look at the structures, you'll see those. They have their own ribosomes, and their own ribosomes actually look like bacteria ribosomes, not eukaryotic ribosomes. And those ribosomes that they have actually make proteins independent of the cell. And then these, mitochondria and the chloroplast, they have their own DNA, and that DNA actually is packed and looks like prokaryotic or bacterial DNA. It doesn't look like eukaryotic DNA, and that's these last two on the list here. These are the evidence that people have cited for saying that, hey, maybe the mitochondria and the chloroplast were actually cells previous to them being organelles. So the mitochondria, it has these folds called cristae, and then the very middle of the mitochondria is just packed full of enzymes, and it's something called the matrix. And in the next, when we get into actual cellular respiration, we'll talk about like the functions of all these. But so right now we're just kind of getting just a roadmap. What does the mitochondria look like, and what does it do? And then same with the chloroplast. But what's nice here, if you look at the pictures, you can see the cristae. You can see these folds back and forth of a membrane. All right, and that increases the surface area. And that's a theme you'll see a lot in biology. And you take anatomy and physiology, you're going to see that with the intestines and the cells of the intestines, where you've got folds, and that increases the surface area to volume ratio. But if you look at these pictures, you'll see there's an outer membrane and an inner membrane. Okay, and the inner membrane is the folded. The folds are called cristae. The fluid that's in the middle is called the matrix. And then they do name the space between the inner and outer membrane. It's called the intermembrane space. And let's go on to the chloroplast. Oops, sorry. I took a liberty of just ripping a couple of pictures off the internet about the mitochondria. Not all mitochondria look the same. Here on the left, you can see the mitochondria in cross section, where the mitochondria is kind of like sausage shaped. They just chop it and then kind of open it up and see what it looks like, and you can see just the massive amounts of membranes. And then same on the right, you can see all sorts of stuff going on in there. And then actually just below it, you can see on the picture on the right, you can see the rough endoplasmic reticulum. Don't forget that. Anyway, chloroplasts are found in plants. They're green. They tend to be green. They're usually found in leaves. And they have an outer membrane, but then they have an inner membrane. And then within that inner membrane, they have all different types of other membranes. So one little kind of sac, almost looks like a pancake, is called a thylakoid. And then if you stack those pancakes, you get what's called a granum. In the chloroplast, we have like a middle liquid again that's filled with enzymes. It's not called the matrix, and this one is called the stroma. And that can be a little bit confusing if you study plants, because in the leaves they have a structure called a stoma minus the R, and that's a hole. But anyway, let's take a look at these. So you got left and right. Left is the artist's conception. On the right is an electron micrograph, and you really can't see the inner and outer membranes on the micrograph, but you can see the grana, how they are. The granum is singular, grana is plural, but you can see how they're stacked together here. And then you can kind of see some of the connections. You really can't see an individual thylakoid. And then this next slide, there's some more pictures. Pretty much more of the same. Don't forget, there's the liquid in the middle is the stroma. Here's another one on the right. You can kind of see it within whatever cell it's in. But these organelles are responsible for taking light energy, converting it into chemical energy. And then we also have the peroxisome. You're probably familiar with hydrogen peroxide. That's a chemical that's actually kind of poisonous, and our bodies will make hydrogen peroxide kind of accidentally sometimes. And the last thing you want to do is make a lot of poison inside your body. So this organelle called the peroxisome kind of evolved once we started doing kind of aerobic respiration, or with oxygen, and we started making this peroxide. Anyway, so hydrogen peroxide gets created, and then the cell has the peroxisome that makes something called catalase, and so here it is, and it'll break down the H2O2, which is hydrogen peroxide, into water and oxygen. All right, you can see here's a peroxisome. It's nestled right next to the mitochondria. The reason why you put hydrogen peroxide in your cuts and wounds is because it's also poisonous to bacteria. So if you get a cut, you can pour that hydrogen peroxide in that wound, and it's not gonna, hopefully it won't kill you, but it will flood out the bacteria, and they don't have enough. They may not have enough catalase to break it down. Or if they're an anaerobic bacteria where they don't live in the presence of oxygen, they have no catalase and they instantly die. Anyway, so that's your mitochondria, chloroplast, and peroxisome. Focus on the mitochondria and chloroplast. Remember their functions and their structures. Okay, so mitochondria makes ATP in all eukaryotic cells. It's got an inner and outer membrane. It's got the cristae. It's got the matrix. Chloroplast is mainly going to be found in plants and algae, and it's taking light energy and turning it into chemical energy. All right, hope that helps. Thanks.